still some folks trickling in, but our speaker has a lot of material to cover tonight, and so in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. We appreciate everyone for coming out tonight to our Franklin Community Bible Study. I'm glad that you're here. Tonight we're going to be looking at scientific evidence that shows us that there must be a creator, there must be a God. A lot of people in our world today believe that science is showing us that there shouldn't be a God, couldn't be a God. But we're going to see tonight that that's just exactly the opposite. The more and more discoveries that we find, the more we understand that there must be an intelligent God behind the creation of this world. Tonight, Buddy Payne is joining us from Tampa, Florida. He is a well-studied man who has degrees in mathematics and chemistry. He has his bachelor's degree in chemistry education from Florida State University, a master's degree in chemistry education from Harvard University, and a PhD in math education from the University of South Florida. He taught chemistry for 8 years. He taught calculus for 31 years, and so after that, he went into the administration of the university for 33 years, and ultimately was president of the university. We say all that to let you know that he has opened up a science club before, and he knows what he's talking about. But most importantly, he's a Bible student and he understands God's Word. He's going to connect the two of those with it for us tonight. So we're looking forward to that. When you came in, hopefully you got a comment card. The bottom of that is perforated, and there's a box where you can write down any question you might have about something that's said tonight. We're going to have about an hour's worth of material presented, and then we'll follow that with a period of question and answer. If you have a question, we need it to be on the card. Logistic reasons make it necessary that we have those cards written so that we can present them to Brother Payne, and he can read those off and answer those questions. So if you have a question about something tonight that's presented, use that comment card. We'll start with a prayer, and then we'll turn the floor over. Please pray. Our Father in heaven, we're so thankful for this good day that you've given us, for the blessings we've enjoyed from you today, for the health and ability that you've given us to be together tonight, to look to your word and look to your creation, to understand more about you and more about the evidence for your existence. I pray that you be with us tonight as we look to these facts and to look to your word. Help us to be open to the truth that you present to us therein. Help us to live in a way that will be pleasing to you in all things. Bless us throughout this time. In Jesus' name we pray.
All right, testing 1, 2, 3. Are we loud and clear? Good. I want to welcome all of you to this facility this evening. I've never been to the factory, nor have I spoken in a factory. So it's a special privilege tonight to get to speak to you in this setting. Thank you for taking the time out of your life to come this evening. I think you already understand that this is a 2-lesson series, tonight and tomorrow night. And our goal in that course of that series is to look at evidence from the natural world. So my introduction is going to be very brief because I want to get to the subject at hand. I want you to know that I am a science teacher. I'm not a scientist in the sense that I've not ever worked in laboratories and done the science directly. But I've taught science for most of my life and mathematics, which is, of course, the queen of the sciences. And believe that I can take complex material and explain it to folks. And that's what my goal is, of course, of this series. In addition to that, I'm a believer in God, and I believe the Bible is the Word of God. But I want to tell you that in this series, and what I do in this kind of a series all the time, is I do not turn my attention to the Bible as the source of information, although I will refer to it a little bit tonight. I turn my attention to what I like to call God's other book, the book of the natural world. And it speaks loudly and clearly, in my view, to the existence of God. So that's where I'm coming from, And I want you to understand that I deeply appreciate the sciences. They have done amazing things for mankind. And I respect it greatly, the procedure even. But I think some folks have taken that process and have expanded upon it to a point that really is beyond what science can tell us. So let's turn our attention now to this question. Can Christianity and science coincide? Is there conflict or coherence between science and Christianity? I am a Christian, so that's an important question to me. And whatever your position is about that, I hope you're willing to listen and carefully consider the things I'm going to say as we talk about this important question. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, that the Bible itself speaks to this topic. So I'm going to refer at the beginning of my lesson to two passages in the Bible. One is found in Psalm 19. So I want to read a little portion of that to you. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night reveals knowledge. There is no speech nor language. Their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. The psalmist declares that the heavens speak of God, and that they declare his existence. The second passage I want to refer you to is in the New Testament, Romans chapter 1 and verse 20, which says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." What that passage teaches, ladies and gentlemen, is that you can see the invisible God by seeing the things that are made. In fact, it argues that you can see his power and his divinity from examining the natural world. So I'm going to refer to that, what the Bible position is, as the observation of nature reveals God. That's what the Bible says. And so I'm going to call it the argument from design. What this passage argues is if you can examine the natural world and see that things are made, it leads you to believe there's a maker. And that's the famous argument from design. So that's the biblical position about the natural world, and that's the direction we're going to take tonight. And for the rest of my time this evening, I will not be reading from this book. So I'm going to set that book aside, and we're going to turn now to God's other book. Because I will tell you, when science as we know it today was first brought into existence, it was done by Christians and other believers in God. That's just a fact. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. Many of the key scientists in the Age of Enlightenment in the 16 to 1800s, as the Enlightenment, the Renaissance they called it, were strong believers in God and in Jesus the Christ and in the Bible. So I want to illustrate that to you because these men certainly had no problem with conflict between Christianity and science. They felt they were coherent. And so, for example, Johannes Kepler, famous astronomer of the 50s and early 1600s. Here are a couple of quotes from Johannes Kepler. "I was merely thinking God's thoughts after him. Since we astronomers are the priests of the highest God in regard to the book of nature, it benefits us to be thoughtful not of the glory of our minds, but rather above all else of the glory of God." Don't you love that? Here's a scientist deeply respected for his science work who says, "My work is for the glory of God." And then, "Studies in the world using science are acceptable to me and to Christians, since our faith holds that the world was created by God in weight, measure, and number. And that is in accordance with the ideas co-eternal with him," he said in his famous work, The Harmony of the World. founders of modern-day science, Johann Kepler, openly expressed his conviction that nature itself, through the sciences, testifies of God. And a second one I want to introduce is Isaac Newton, 1600 to the early 1700s. I don't know that there's ever been a more powerful and intelligent and amazing scientist on the earth than Isaac Newton. And here's what he said in one of his statements. This is from the General Scholium to the Principia, his most important work. Though these bodies, and he's speaking of the solar system in which we live, may indeed continue in their orbits by the mere laws of gravity, and I'll pause there to remind you that Isaac Newton is credited with the first mathematical description of gravity, although he never did figure out what it is, nor has anyone else to this point. But he was able to describe it mathematically, and may I say that science has never reached a higher peak than when it can describe physical phenomena by mathematics. And so when I taught calculus, if you'd have been in my class, literally that would be studying infinity, we're thinking God's thoughts after him. And so Newton would say they could by no means have at first derived the regular position of the orbits themselves from these laws. Thus, this most beautiful system of the sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being, whom he called God. And so, Isaac Newton was a strong, firm believer in God. And now I skip forward just a little bit to 1743 to 1805. To William Paley, and young people in this audience, if you'd been in college in the early 1800s, you would have taken this class. Natural theology, or the evidences of the existence and attributes of the deity collected from the appearances of nature. It was a standard college course in the early 1800s. Charles Darwin took this class, and it impacted him greatly, he said in his own words, to see that there was evidence of God in the natural world. And one of the great stories from this book that he produced is the famous watchmaker argument. You may have heard of that one. And I just copied some of that. I thought I'd read it to you. But if you don't mind, I'll use a bit of a British accent. In crossing a heath, suppose I fix my foot against the stone, and were asked how the stone came to be there. I might possibly answer that for anything I knew to the contrary, it had lain there forever. Nor would it be possible very easy to show the absurdity of that answer. But suppose I had found a watch upon the ground, and it should be inquired how the watch happened to be there. I should hardly think that the answer which I had before given would be acceptable. The watch must have had a maker who comprehended its construction and designed its use. Every manifestation of design which existed in the watch exists in the works of nature, with the difference on the side of nature being greater in a degree that exceeds all computation. And thus he introduced his book on natural theology, the whole course of which is to demonstrate nature testifies to God. So I'm saying to this class, and as I may call you my class, this is a lecture, that the earliest inventors of modern-day science were strong and convicted believers in God. There was no conflict in their minds between Christianity and science. But by the end of the 20th century, I can tell you, class, that folks had a totally different perspective. So I'm going to quote to you now from Richard Dawkins, who presently serves as the British evolutionary biology and author, professor of public understanding of science at Oxford University. Did you notice what I just said? He was appointed by that institution as the professor of the understanding of science for the common man. So that's why I quote him, because that's cool, and he's one of the best representatives to explain science to us. And I want to give you some things he has said to us in this text. book itself in June was published in 1976. He says faith is blind trust. In the absence of evidence, even in the teeth of evidence, it is a process of non-thinking. That's what Mr. Dawkins thinks about those of us who believe in God. Faith, he says, is foolishness. In his book, The Blind Watchmaker, 1986, he makes this comment. All appearances to the contrary, the only watchmaker in nature is the blind forces of physics, albeit deployed in a very special way. Natural selection is the blind watchmaker. And he spends 300 pages trying to convince folks that things that look like they're designed are not designed. That in fact nature did it. And we don't need God. And in his earlier book in 2006, God Delusion, I guess that was a little later than the other two, he says that this book works as I intend. Religious readers who open it will be atheists when they put it down. And he goes on to say, God is a delusion, a psychotic delinquent invented by mad religious people. Now, folks, that's not very nice. That's not a nice thing to say. This whole book is designed to show you that if you're a believer in God, you're deluded. And God is not a very nice person. He's been made up by you anyway. Well, I want to tell you something for myself. I don't at all get hesitant to get feisty. In fact, sometimes I yell to get the point across. But I hope I'm never ugly and disrespectful and mean. Richard Dawkins sometimes is very disrespectful, and it's not helpful to disrespect. So I'm sorry that in the 20th century, we've developed to a place now where many scientists speak very disparagingly of faith and of those who believe in God. So I want to say right here, every position on origins is ultimately a position of faith. I have had more pushback for that statement from scientists than anything else I've seen. Because they don't want any part in faith. But I'm telling you, ultimately, you have to step off. You cannot directly observe the origin of all things. You have to imply things based on evidence. But my faith is based on evidence that is implying the existence of God, not blind faith. And never has God expected blind faith. So, the Cosmos series by Carl Sagan, maybe you watched that. It was the most watched science series ever. And the original statement from that series in 1980 about Carl Sagan was teaching at Harvard when I was a student there. I didn't have him, but he was there, and he later went to Cornell. He's a phenomenal speaker, very influential. His first statement in that series was, the cosmos is all that is, or was, or ever will be. And may I say to you, that is not a science statement. That's a strange way to begin a science program. The science could no more demonstrate that. That is a statement of philosophy. He's a naturalist. He believes there's nothing but nature. And he can believe that all he wants, but don't represent that as a scientific statement. It's not. You don't know from science that that's a true statement. So the conflict between science and Christianity is relatively new, folks. So how did things change so radically in 200 years? From the 1800s to the 2000s. How did that happen? Well, what you're going to hear next is the briefest history of science treatment in history. I don't have much time to deal with this because I want to get on to the next part. But I do want to briefly show you how that happened. One of the men that lived close to the time of Newton was Pierre Simon de Laplace, 1749 to 1827. He perceived of himself as the next Isaac Newton, and may I say he was far from it. But his comment about what Newton said was, nature with its matter, energy, and forces could produce and maintain our solar system. There is no need for the God hypothesis, said Pierre de Laplace. No need. That, folks, was the beginning, with a whole host of others who got included, of saying things about science that went beyond what science can tell you. In his book, The Principles of Geology, Charles Lyell took an attempt to explain the former changes in the Earth's surface by references to causes now in operation. The present, he said, is the key to the past. And so he concluded that you don't need God for the geological formations either. And then Charles Darwin came along in the late 1800s. 1859 is when he actually published his book on the origin of species by means of natural selection. And I don't know if you can read that subheading. It says, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. That's the subheading for his book. And if you know your history, you know that after 1859, when this was published, his theory for how living things evolved have swept the world. It has become the modern day accepted explanation for how you got here without any God. And he said it was by natural selection. There's no need for a designer to account for the origin of the species of life. Natural selection acting on natural variation accounts for the appearances of design, which is exactly what Mr. Dawkins says in his book, The Blind Watchmaker. Natural selection can do it all. It's like God himself. You don't need God. So one subject after another, people began to say, God is not needed. And then Alexander O'Parent and J.B.S. Haldane came up with the notion that there's no need for God to produce life from non-living things either. And so the O'Parent-Haldane hypothesis kind of won the day for a period of years as how non-living things can produce living things. We don't have time to go into all that tonight. But that kind of summarizes it all, that all the various facets of the sciences don't need God. And so in your time, the 20th and 21st century, it has become the century of conflict between science and Christianity. And I say to you tonight, it's time to revisit the argument from design. And that's what I'd like to do for these 2 nights. So I'm here to say to you, I'm convinced that the argument from design is more powerful than it's ever been to point us to God by looking at the natural world. So here's a treatise I'd like to refer you to by Stephen Meyer. It's called The Return of the God Hypothesis. I have the book here just to show you. It's a little bit thick, but it's a wonderful treatise, and Stephen Meyer is a scientist who's a good writer. A lot of scientists are not good writers, but he is. And I think you would thoroughly enjoy this book as an opening for you to this topic, because he presents in this book the 20th and 21st centuries has opened the door for the argument from design more powerfully than ever. And it's the science that has done it. Return to the God hypothesis. By the way, I forgot to mention at the beginning, my title came from this little book by Henry Schaeffer, Conflict or Coherence, Science and Christianity. Dr. Schaeffer is a well-renowned and world-respected chemist, taught at all the major universities in our country, many of them. And it's a book that summarizes how many Christians there are who are strong and published and respected scientists. So it's another good source for you. But here's the proposal of this book by Meyer. He said the evidence has become overwhelmingly strong in 3 areas of science. And tonight I want to talk about 2 of those. First, the universe, space, matter, and time had a beginning. Did you know that most atheists
unbelievers prefer that matter be eternal. They don't like the idea of a beginning. In fact, some of them openly expressed that it's uncomfortable for them. They don't like it. But the evidence of the natural world is so strong now, pointing to a beginning. And there's a whole section of that. I'm not talking about that one tonight, but it's a powerful one. Because if there was a beginning, folks, who started it and what happened before that? And science cannot deal with that. And that's why scientists don't like that. Because it's an unconformity. It's where you have to get off with your science. Secondly, the universe, our solar system, and Earth are remarkably fine-tuned to support life on Earth and have been since the beginning. The statements I'm reading to you from Dr. Meyer are statements you can confirm for yourself. I don't want you accepting what I'm saying, reading what he's saying. You go look for yourself. The atheists and agnostics will support that this is a true statement. I'll show you some of that in just a minute. Fine-tuning of the universe to support life on Earth is a fact, folks, that has been substantiated by science. And the question is, why is it that way? And thirdly, even the simplest forms of life at the biochemical level, and that's my specialty, and we'll talk about that partly tonight and a whole lot more tomorrow night. So that's the first advertisement for tomorrow night. Contain massive amounts of digital information being used to produce and maintain an untold number of molecular machines and complex processes. Folks, that is a well-established fact in the 20th and 21st century. Prior to that, we did not know this. So modern science is turning us back to the argument from design. And I'd like to show you some of that this evening. So let's talk a little bit about fine-tuning. We'll start with Paul Davies. Paul Davies is an evolutionist through and through. He does not believe in God, but he does have to admit in his books what I'm about to tell you. He wrote a book called The Goldilocks Enigma. The Goldilocks Enigma. Kids, y'all remember Goldilocks? Well, let me refresh your memory. She went into the woods, didn't she? And went into the house, a big old house, and we learned later it was the house of the three bears, right? And she first found a table with pots of porridge. And she tried the first one, and it was too hot, wasn't it? You're allowed to answer, by the way. And so we went to the next one, and it was too cold. And then she finally went to the last one, and it was just right. That's why he calls this the Goldilocks Enigma. Because why is the universe just right for life? This man is not a believer in God. And his question is, how is it? Well, he has a natural explanation, but I'll tell you, it's convoluted and difficult. The much simpler explanation is, somebody designed this. So what does he say about it? Well, here's one statement. One of the most significant facts, arguably the most significant fact about the universe, is that we are part of it. How'd you get here? That's a big question. And it appears that the factors of nature are so fine-tuned to support your life, living things. Why is that? And how is that? Here's another one. He did an interview with the Horizon series on the BBC, and he spoke of the anthropic principle. The anthropic principle says that things sure look like they were made for anthropos. That's us. And here's what he said. The really amazing thing is not that life on Earth is balanced on a knife edge, but that the entire universe is balanced on a knife edge and would be a total chaos if any of the natural constants were off even slightly. So I want that to sink in, everybody. If this were a court case, and I were the prosecution and the evolutionist was the defense, we would both agree on these facts. I'm not telling you things we don't agree on. on that. The facts are the entire universe is balanced on a knife edge, and if you change anything in its constants just slightly, it would be chaos. You wouldn't be here. Nobody disagrees with that. The question is why? When I was in college in the 1960s, scientists had discovered 2 characteristics of the cosmos and 8 to 10 of the solar system that were fine-tuned, best they could determine. By the 2000s, folks, it had gone up to 38 characteristics of the cosmos and over 150 characteristics of the solar system. And if this were a court case and you're the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, here's what I'd say to you. How many coincidences can you stand before you have to say somebody did that? Well, there's at least 188 fine-tuned factors that all have to be just right or you wouldn't be here. That's a fact. So how many coincidences can you deal with? That's the question. Now, shall we go through 188 of them? No. But I do want to show you a few. So I want to turn to this little book, which I'd highly recommend to you. It's called God's Crime Scene by J. Warner Wallace. J. Warner Wallace was a detective for years, still is. He's a cold case detective. That's a fellow that takes a case that's been lying around for a long time and hasn't been solved, and solves it. And he's been very successful. And he grew up under a father who was an atheist, and so was he. J. Warner Wallace has become a believer in God and a believer in Jesus Christ. And he wrote this book in an effort to convince his daddy. And as far as I know, he has not convinced him yet. But it's a wonderful book. And so every chapter is built around a court case that he himself solved. So I'm going to start in chapter 2. And for the sake of the kids, I want to read you a story. All right, so adults, stay with me. Helen knew something was wrong when her daughter Carrie failed to answer the door. It was a bright summer afternoon, and Carrie said she'd be home, and her car indeed was parked in the driveway. Helen tried to peek in through the living room window, but the curtains were unusually drawn. Carrie never locked the back door, but when Helen walked into the backyard of the old house, she found the door locked and all the windows closed. This was not like Carrie. She usually left one badly worn window standing slightly ajar. Not this time. Helen began to panic. She knew Todd and Carrie had a tumultuous marriage, one that included physical violence. Todd had moved out, but Helen still feared for her daughter's safety. The couple had a child named Lexi, but the violence had only increased since her birth. A week ago, Todd had threatened to kill Carrie, and just last night, Carrie confided there had been yet another fight. So when Helen could not get Carrie to answer the door this afternoon, she called the police. And the police came. And I'm going to give you a little summary now. They started investigating the case, and when they got in the house, they smelled gas. And it was awful, so they had to bring a hazmat team. And they finally got in the house and cleared it out and were able to get up those stairs. And they found 2 dead bodies, Carrie and Lexi. And the question was, did that happen by natural causes? Or was there tampering here? You see, he says a detective has to answer this question. Can you solve this case by staying inside the room? In other words, can you answer all the things you see here? Is there a reasonable answer inside the room? And I can tell you in this case, there were a lot of factors that said, no, they have to look out. Somebody tampered with this. For example, the door to the bedroom upstairs had a bunch of clothes piled in front of it, dirty clothes, under the door. Kerry never did that. The gas thing was turned open. By the way, they hadn't had gas for a long time. But that night they had gas. And by the way, all the windows were closed, everything was closed up, and the opening to the gas outlet into the bedroom was wide open, everything else was closed down. And then they learned that Todd had gone to the gas company 2 days before their death and asked them to reinstitute the gas service. And so they opened a homicide investigation. Because, folks, the evidence was piling up, evidence against that having happened without somebody tampering with it. So then he goes on in his chapter, and I want you to get this because it's powerful. He says, we were compelled to examine the evidence of tampering because of one important fact. There were 2 dead bodies in the crime scene. And inside was not enough to explain it. In a similar way, when we look at nature, the nature of our universe, the existence of living bodies should provoke an investigation. How'd the living bodies get here? Like our murder scene, there are foundational, regional, and locational conditions demanding explanation. Let me just explain that a minute. In this case of murder, the foundational things were like their relationship, which was horrible, and the background that they learned about as they investigated. The regional things had to do with the outside around the house, and the locational had to do with what all they found inside the house. And you put all that together, ladies and gentlemen, and you had a strong circumstantial case. This was an outside job. The foundational laws of physics, the regional properties of our solar system, and the locational conditions on our planet resulted in our existence. But did this have to be the case? If circumstances had been just slightly different in Carrie's house, nobody would have died that night. In a similar way, if circumstances had been just slightly different in our universe, no one would be alive today. The conditions had to be, say it with me, just so, just right, in order for you to be here. That suggests, ladies and gentlemen, outside tampering. Somebody was dealing with this from the outside. And J. Warner Wallace has become convinced that it was God that brought us about. So he begins a treatment then of some of the things that are finely tuned. The anthropic principle. And he lists a whole bunch of them. Some of them have to do with the laws of nature. These are foundational. And the physical constants and ratios you find in nature, and the properties of elements and chemicals. And listen, folks like Paul Davies and lots of other people say, we're scratching our head. How did that get to be just that way? And if it changes just a little teensy bit, nothing works. How'd that happen? Well, it's a wonderful coincidence that we happen to live on the right planet with all the right circumstances. What a coincidence. I'll tell you how far some people have gone because it's so hard to answer. There's been a whole theory developed. There's a bunch of universes, not just ours. They call it the multiverse. Is there one scintilla of scientific evidence for a multiverse? We can't even see all of our own universe. There's no scientific background for a multiverse. It's picked out of thin air. No, there's evidence of tampering, ladies and gentlemen. So he gives one example, the ratio of electrons to protons. It's precariously balanced. Remember we said a knife's edge? The ratio of electrons to protons. And if you don't know what that is, that's okay. All you need to know is it has to be finely balanced. In fact, if you changed its value more than 1 in 10 to the 37th, you wouldn't be here. And that's just one of hundreds of things like that. So what's 10 to the 37th? That's a number too big to even conceive. So he gives an example to try to help you with that. I'll probably make it worse. Imagine covering the entire North American continent in dimes and stacking them till they reach the moon. Now you got this? Now imagine stacking just that many dimes again on another 1 billion continents of the same size as North America. So you got 1,000,000,001 continents, size of North America, stacked with dimes to the moon. Is that picture clear in your mind? If you marked one of those dimes and hid it in the billions of piles you'd assemble, the odds of a blindfolded friend picking out the correct dime is approximately 1 in 10 to the 37. The same level of precision required for the ratio of electrons to protons. Well, what a coincidence. Well, you might could handle one coincidence like that, or two, maybe even 3 or 4. But how about 188? These all speak to finely balanced foundational issues. How about regional? Well, you got to be in the right galaxy, people. Did you know that we didn't used to think there were very many galaxies? In fact, many astronomers thought the Milky Way was the only galaxy at one time, our galaxy. We've been long since convinced differently than that. But it's not just any old galaxy that can support life on a planet around a star. No, sir. So here's a picture. You talk about a current picture. This was produced on July the 12th, 2022 from the James Webb Space Telescope. It's a cluster called SMACS 0723. And I wanted them to turn off all the lights in here so you could really see them. Because your problem, class, is you don't ever see all the stars you can see. Because you're living in a city. And you city folks just don't get it. So I wanted all the lights off so you could really see this. But before we do that, we're not going to turn the lights off because it takes them 30 minutes to come back on. And I'm sorry, I can't last that long. But listen to me. The James Webb Telescope folks said, you take a piece of sand and hold it in your hand. Stick it out here arm's length. And the amount of the universe that is subtended by that one grain of sand is what this is a picture of. Wow. Are you with me? It's that one little teensy piece. If you stuck a grain of sand out there, it's what's behind that grain of sand. Okay? So let's look. Isn't that an amazing star? No, that's a galaxy. Probably has 200 billion stars in it. That's a galaxy, that's a galaxy, that's a galaxy, that's a galaxy, that's a galaxy. These are all galaxies, ladies and gentlemen. The estimate today is there are trillions upon trillions of galaxies. Remember Carl Sagan used to say billions and billions? Well, our government can handle billions and billions. I don't think they can even handle trillions and trillions. There's a lot of galaxies out there. So you know what Sagan said in his series and later on. He was one of the ones who started the SETI program, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And it's still going on. And by the way, we're debating some of this stuff in Congress right now, aren't we? Are you following the news about UFOs? Folks, there is not one scintilla of scientific evidence, solid evidence, that they're little green men that have visited our planet. Get over it. But may I say to you, that most of the galaxies you see up there would not support life on a planet around a star in that galaxy. And everybody knows it. Did you hear what I just said? The type of galaxy that supports a living system like ours is a spiral galaxy, and only about 5% of the galaxies that we've found are spirals. So that really eliminates the others as reasonable candidates for looking for life somewhere else. Sagan said there may be millions of civilizations in the Milky Way, much less in trillions of other galaxies. He taught that all the time. Do you know, folks, that there are now scientists publishing books called The Rare Earth, which argues that we may be the only place in the universe that supports life, complex life? Because the evidence is piling up for the things that all have to be just right. Where else is there going to be a place that is just right? Hard to find. Well, it's got to be the right kind of galaxy. But that's not good enough, folks. It's not good enough just to be in a spiral galaxy. Here's a spiral galaxy on its side. See that big bulb in the middle? If the planetary system were inside there, it would be squashed by gravitational forces in microseconds. No, it has to be in a certain place. And the only places in a spiral galaxy where it could exist would be in these donuts out here. And guess where our sun is? Right there. Another coincidence. It just happens to be in the place just right in our galaxy where it could support a planetary system, one of which has life on it. Interesting coincidence, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. But I'm just getting started. It's not enough to have the right galaxy, you gotta have the right kind of star. So I want to give you some illustrations. Here's our sun, kind of in a blow up. And here are some planets. Well, the sun's a whole lot bigger than the planets, obviously. But did you know that the sun is not very big compared to some other stars? Sirius, Pollux, Arcturus. There's the sun right there. And we ain't finished yet. Watch this. Here's our, oops. Let's see here. Here is the sun. Right there. Can you see it? I can't either. The sun is tiny, T90 compared to Betelgeuse and Antares. So, folks, do you know where our sun fits? It's almost exactly in the middle of the kinds of stars. There's a bunch of dwarf stars, smaller than our sun. There's a bunch of stars way bigger than our sun, and our sun is just right. So there's another interesting coincidence. We just happen to be around the right kind of star. But folks, it's not just its size, it's its temperature and what place it has and how it conducts itself. You know, stars can be mean and ugly. Our sun is relatively quiet. We have just the right star. Is that good enough? No, you got to have the right planet. So here's our planets. You think there's life on Jupiter, class? No. I hope not. It's mostly helium and hydrogen. There wouldn't be any life there. Everybody knows it. Saturn, the same way. Uranus and Neptune, they're too big and amazingly wrong for life. So where are they looking right now? Besides Earth, we have life here. Mars, which is that one. Why not Venus? I mean, it's the closest in size to us, and it is approximately in the habitable zone. Well, it's because Venus is a messed up planet. That's why. You go study for yourself. It rotates the wrong way. It's got mostly sulfuric acid in its atmosphere, not really good for supporting life. So out of all the planets in this particular planetary system, the Earth and possibly Mars, but they haven't found anything worth talking about on Mars, folks. And Earth is covered up with life. How about Pluto? Is that a planet? You need to study New Horizons. They sent a spaceship to Pluto. And I think most folks are reinstating it. It's not very big. Did you know Pluto has a bunch of moons? So you got a homework assignment. You want to go look it up. No fair looking now. Anyway, you have to have a certain planet. It has to be the right everything. Watch. Locationally, it's got to have the proper mass, spin, tilt, moon, atmosphere, crust, etc., 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 etc. The properties of the biochemicals within it have to be within very fine limits. And the cells and the genetic code and the molecular machines all have specific limitations. And there are thousands of machines in your cell, in every cell of your body, doing amazing things every second. And we know it. We didn't know that 50 years ago. So I'm concluding tonight. Let me see what time we've got. About 7 minutes, right? Here's our picture of a cell. In Darwin's day, one of the comments about a cell was that it's an albuminous lump of carbon. They thought it was just a little blob. Really simple. Nature could just produce a cell just like that, naturally. Look what we've got here, class. Every school child has studied this. This thing has got all kinds of things. Ribosomes, nuclear envelopes, nucleolus, smooth endoplasmic reticulum, rough endoplasmic. There's just so many parts to this, every one of them extremely complicated. And if you have nothing else but the lipid bilayer and the membrane protein here, you want to talk about problems. That layer itself has got all kinds of amazing complexities everywhere you look. And I want you to see the size of things we're talking about. So a millimeter is 1,000th of a meter. A micrometer is 1/1,000,000th of a meter. A nanometer is 1/1,000,000,000th of a meter. And a picometer is 1/1,000,000,000th of a meter. What we're talking about, class, when I tell you about molecular machines, is at the nano level. So picture in your mind, here's a meter stick this long, divided up into 1,000,000,000 equal parts. And one of those pieces is a nanometer. And did you know, class, that we have engineers working on nano machines? You can't even see it. Here's a picture of some things in their sizes. Frog eggs are about 1 millimeter. Paramecium is about 50 to 300 micrometers. Chromosome 1 to 10 micrometers, and a normal cell is about 100 micrometers. You see, optical microscopes can see this stuff. But I'm talking over here. 1 nanometer, the DNA molecule is about 2 nanometers. Antibodies are about 10. This is where we're talking about for the rest of this lecture tonight. So don't forget that. We were just talking about billions and trillions of galaxies that have billions of stars in them. Now we're talking about things that are 1/1000,000th of a meter. So from one end to the other. And what I'm telling you, class, is from one end to the other, they're fine-tuned. Every step of the way. And I need to apologize to the God of heaven for the pitifully incomplete job I'm doing of getting this across. Because it's so much more massive than I'm explaining. But I do want to go a little bit further and tell you that a molecular machine is a natural device on the molecular scale that is nanometers, able to convert chemical energy to produce linear or rotary motion, as well as controlling many biological functions. And we have learned in the last 50 years, there are thousands of those in every single cell in your body. Thousands of them. Doing stuff all the time. So here's three of them. The myosin handles the contraction of muscles. The kinesin handles cargo movement and helps with cell division. The dyneins help the beating of cilia and flagella in cell division. And every one of those has a story that would take me a week to explain. They're amazing things. Here's a picture of a kinesin walker. It's just a drawing. The kinesin walkers are these little guys. And they walk along microtubules, which are made by your cells. And they carry big, heavy stuff. Do you see how much bigger that is than that little guy? A kinesin walker's carrying stuff like that all the time. You need to be on your knees thanking God for kinesin walkers. Because there's stuff inside your cells that has to be carried from one place to another all the time. These guys get no rest. And there are proteins that are functioning for your life. And they're finely tuned. And Drew Barry, biomedical animator, lives in Australia. He's been one of the most amazing animators. If you want to go look at something fascinating, you go look at some of his animations. And I'm going to show you one right now. Because when you get down to that level, you can't use an optical microscope. You cannot see it, class. Electron microscopes get close, and X-ray crystallography helps. So he does animations to help you picture what's going on. So here we go. IT guy, you ready? I'm counting on him. So here we go. This is a living cell picture that you can take in an optical microscope. Stop right there just a minute. Oops, did I do that? No, you did. He's going to get back to that. Listen to me. Did you know how many mitosis divisions take place in your body on a daily basis? You know how many cells your body kills or destroy themselves or they wear out? 90 billion a day! So your body is mitosing all the time. What I'm about to show you. Mitosis. It's cell division where one cell breaks into two that are exactly like the one that started. Exact copies. Incredible. So this first part of this video is a live cell dividing in mitosis. So let's just watch it. Because you can watch this on an optical microscope. So go. Whoop. What's happening? Now I'm not doing anything. All right, ready? Go. All right, see, this is the nuclear membrane, the stuff, the nuclear DNA, starting to separate apart. You're watching it before your eyes. As this one cell has made exact copies of all the DNA material, and it's now splitting apart, pulled apart, and then it makes the walls. Stop right there. You now have two cells where you had one before. People, if I had the time, we need 2 weeks to explain everything going on in there. It's incredible. And that only happened to you 90 billion times today. And it's like a finely tuned operation. Only there's no doctor operating. It just doesn't. Now, we're going to review that. Let's go back. Keep going, and we're going to do it again. All right, we're back to the beginning now. We're starting to divide the cell. Only this time, we're going to focus in on one chromosome right here. Right there. Stop right there. Metaphase. Come on, guys. I'm counting on you. And by the way, you need to keep up with where you were so you can get back there, right? Can you just scoot it over quicker? Come on, you're wasting my time. You got to be nice to IT people. Y'all hug their necks out is what you're doing. All right, so here we are. Good. There's your metaphase chromosome. And can you see there's already 2 copies there? Folks, I wish I had the time to tell you how your system copies all of your DNA perfectly. That's the stuff you're made of. It just copies it, and then it splits apart, so you now have 2 identical copies of those cells. All right, you see all these little wiry looking things? Those are called microtubules, and they're being formed as this all happens. At the kinetic core right here, keep going. All right, the kinetic core, we're going to kind of close in on here. That's this really active site. And here are those fibrins running out of there. And now we're going to close in on it. Keep your eyes on this red spot. Of course, you know it's not red. It's just it's in its visualization. So it's a giant molecular machine that helps you divide cells. Here's your kinetic core. Here are your microtubules. And now we're going to focus down in here on the kinetic core, and we're going to watch what's happening. You see all this activity here? My. It's building these streets, you see? And then there have been lots of other things in here. Stop right there for just a second. But I need to say something to you. Can you stop? Okay. This thing here, microtubule, goes way down over here. And the little guys are going to be running up and down that tubule. And over here at the end, it's tearing it up just as quickly as it's making it. Kind of like a government project. Only in a cell, if you don't tear down these microtubules after they've used them, you'll blob up the cell so much it can't function anymore. So it's recycled, class, automatically. So you've got proteins over here building the highways, and you've got all kinds of activity in here preparing them to allow those things to split apart using proteins and molecular machines. Let's go. And what our animator is going to do here is going to make this red turn green, because green means go. And it's just saying that it's time to start the activity. So you watch as the reddish areas turn green. There you go. Now they don't really turn green, class, but it makes you think go. So now they're going to start walking. You watch. The little dynein walkers are going to start heading this way, carrying proteins. You see these little guys? Carrying proteins down the road. And all of that's critically important. And the kinine walkers are going the opposite way. And then here are some more proteins holding those things in place. Every bit of this is critical protein functions that's happening in microseconds in every cell in your body. Now we're back to the big picture, and here's the kinetic core, and these things are all functioning just like we saw down inside there. There are probably 50 different proteins activated right here, and all these things taking place, and finally, time comes to set them apart, and the two pieces of the chromosome, all of which is part of the whole picture. Now we're going to go back and see that's just this little part of that whole thing. And every one of those is doing the same thing as it separates and makes one cell into two cells. Identical to the ones before. And class, everybody's eyes on me. You would not be alive unless that were happening finely tuned all the time. Isn't that a coincidence? That's a coincidence number 2,968. And if you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, can believe that, like Richard Dawkins does, I have a bridge to sell you down in Florida. I can't believe it. I think I could win a court case, hands down. Somebody tampered with this. And now, if you'll bear with me, I want to talk just a minute about this man, Dr. James Tour. He's a Messianic Jew. He believes in Jesus Christ as the Son of God. And he openly states it. Go to his website and read it. He is one of the foremost nano engineers in the world. And he's done all kinds of incredible things with engineering at that level. I don't have time to tell you about all that. Just know that he is a foremost engineer at the nano level. And he's done amazing things. And he's a believer. Oops, I went the wrong way. And one of the things he decided to do, since he was doing so many other nano things, was to build a nano car, of course. And so he and his team started building nano cars. That's cars made out of one molecule. And there's a picture of one. It's got wheels, got axles, it's got a driving force here. What you do is activate that with either chemicals or light, and it turns this thing around, which allows it to move. Incredible. Little cars down at the side that you can only see it with electron microscopes. Well, of course, if you got a car, you got to race it, right? So, I want to tell you that the first, oops, I'm going the wrong way again. The first international nano car race was held April 28th and 9th, 2017 in Toulouse, France. In fact, it was held in Toulouse and 3 other places because they have to be where they have to be. Entered into that race was the Austria-US team, which included the Rice University team. This is Dr. Tour's team. France, Germany, Japan, Switzerland, and another US Ohio University. And I'm very proud to tell you that the Austria-US team won the whole thing by going 150 nanometers in 1.5 hours. You know how much 150 nanometers is? That's 150 billionths of a meter. But that was whipping along. Because look at the next closest. Switzerland went 133 nanometers in 6.5 hours. And the rest of them gave up. It's hard to build nano cars, people. And harder to race them. So here's what Dr. Tour said about that. The nano cars built by the Rice University team were much smaller and far less complex than the Kinesin and Dynein walkers and other molecular machines common in every living cell. He said, what we did is nothing compared to what your body's doing. Second, the Rice team has been working on nano cars for 20 years. You think this is easy? Every molecular machine in living cells is much larger and much more complex and much more sophisticated than anything we've ever done. See, we're just trying to mimic what nature already does. And folks like Richard Dawkins will tell you, well, natural selection, acting on natural variation, you can do all that. It's no problem. No problem? Can I show you how much intelligence it took to produce that little nano car? I want to just give you an idea. Because after that race, all the other teams were asking him, will you please publish your material? And he did. And here was one page of it. I'll give you just a minute to read that. And this is page 2. And the problem is, that's only 2 pages out of 281. In the article he wrote on May the 17th, 2017, 1 month after that race. He has a whole team working with him. Would you say it took some intelligence and hard work to make nano cars, which are nothing compared to the machines in every living cabinet? I think it took intelligence. Somebody tampered with that. That didn't just happen by natural selection. These little cars are kind of amazing, but they are nothing. And so would Dr. Tour tell you. We know, folks, that nano cars were designed by intelligent human engineers, don't we? Would anybody dare to say that those things were produced by natural causes? No. So isn't it also reasonable that living cells with all of their thousands of nanomachines, which are far more intricate, complex, interdependent, and full of digital information, were surely designed by some master intelligence, which I'm calling God? I'm asking you, ladies and gentlemen of the court. No wonder Anthony Flew, philosopher, atheist, author, and debater for years, in 2007 wrote a book called There Is No, a God. And the subtitle was How the World's Most Notorious Atheist Changed His Mind. He was 80 years old, folks. I'm 78. I hope I'm flexible enough to change my mind about something as serious as this if it comes to my attention and hits me between the eyes. And here's what Anthony Flew said about himself. It has become inordinately difficult even to begin to think about constructing a naturalistic theory of the evolution of the first reproducing organism. The enormous complexity by which the results were achieved looks to me like the work of intelligence. It now seems to me that the findings of more than 50 years of DNA research have provided materials for a new and enormously powerful argument to design, which is exactly where we started tonight. And I thank you, Dr. Flew, for being honest enough to say, I give up. Somebody designed this. And may I tell you that Todd was convicted of first-degree murder based on a set of circumstantial evidence, foundational, regional, and locational, that summed up there is no way that happened any other way, and he was sent to prison. You can decide whether there's a God or not based on this evidence. So can Christianity and science coincide? The Bible teaches us things were made cause us to see God. Science shows us that everywhere we look, from the macroscopic to the microscopic, things sure look like they're made. We see the evidence everywhere, from the billions to the nanos. And it all screams design. What does it take for you, ladies and gentlemen? Is it reasonable to believe in God in this scientific age? I will tell you, Christianity and science agree that it's more reasonable than it has ever been in the history of mankind. And that's my lesson for tonight. Tomorrow night, we're going to talk deeply about chemistry. I hope you don't listen. All right, what are we doing next?
I hope you have the cards, and I hope you have some questions that you'd like to ask. If you would, put those in the box in the back. On the other side, whether you have a question or not, we'd like you to do us a favor. If you would like to be informed about future Bible studies like this is the third annual study we've done like this. We plan to do them every year. Give us your name and address, or just your email address, and we'll keep you informed about those studies. If you'd like to talk further about this topic or any Bible topic, we'd love to have a discussion with you. You can check the box for that. We won't use your contact information for any other purpose other than to keep you informed about Bible studies. We're not going to give it to anyone else. But if you would give us that information, it would be very helpful for us. If you don't want to give us your information, you can do us one favor. We did a lot of advertising for this. We'd like to know what was most effective. You can just tell us how you found out about the study and give us that card as well. So if you would take just a second to put that information down, and some of the gentlemen will go around and collect those cards, and then we'll give those questions to Buddy, and he can look them over and give us a quick answer, just a few minutes, and then we'll conclude our time together tonight. While the men are collecting that information, I want to let you know that this study has been sponsored by the South Franklin Church of Christ. We are not connected with any other group. No other groups that use that name. We're completely independent. Our commitment is to doing what we read about in the Bible. We are firmly committed that there is a creator behind all of this, and that we need to be submitting our will to his. And we're committed to doing that. And so if you'd like to know more about us, give us your information, and we'll be glad to keep you there. We'll plan to meet again tomorrow night at 7 to continue this study. So just a few minutes, we'll get these questions to Buddy, and he can answer those questions. study tonight, and that is available at franklinbiblestudy.com if you want to share that link with someone who wasn't here. They can watch the recording of that. It will be streamed tonight, tomorrow night as well.
All right, thank you for taking the time to write some questions here. What I'm going to do is ask questions first that relate to tonight's lecture, because there's some questions that have gone lots of different places, and I want to deal with things that deal with tonight first. So we'll do that, and we have time to get to some others. But let me see if I can pick out ones that relate directly. Why is another's belief in God evidence of God? And I don't think I was saying that tonight. If I left that impression to you that somebody else's belief in God should be evidence for you to believe in God, that's not what I was saying. I was saying that these gentlemen have themselves been believers in God based on the evidence of the natural world. So I'm not asking you to believe because I believe, certainly not. Is there evidence Newton was referring to the Christian God? And yes, there is. You can go read after Newton. He was firmly convinced that Jesus was the Christ as well. So it wasn't just God in general, although in my view, that's better than saying we don't need God at all. But no, Newton certainly was a believer in Jesus as well as God. So how does a watch, an inanimate object, relate to biology and evolution? That's exactly the question Dawkins asks in his book, The Blind Watchman. He says the analogy between a watch and a living thing is not good, because a living thing has lots of things about it that a watch doesn't. And here's how I would answer that, and I think William Paley would say the same thing, that all he's saying is a watch, which is an inanimate object, shows signs that somebody built it. That's the only argument he's making. And I'm saying when you look at the evidence of living things, which I've tried to show you tonight, they too sure look like somebody designed them. I mean, in my mind, that is certainly by far the simplest explanation. I do want to say this to you also. I understand you cannot investigate God ultimately using science, because he is supernatural. He's not a natural being. So science can only investigate nature. But does that mean you can't investigate nature and that points to somebody designed this? I don't think you have to eliminate that. And by the way, you know what the SETI organization is looking for? They're looking for signs of intelligent life in the universe. How are they going to find that? You know what they're looking for? Radio signals that contain a language. You know why? Because they know nature doesn't do that. So if they found such a thing, that would be good evidence there's somebody intelligent out there that did that. Are you with me? That's the same argument I'm making. Only it's better because we've got so much to look at right here on Earth. So you see, that's how. Is Sagan's statement any less a statement of science or more belief than belief in God? No, class, listen. I'm not arguing Sagan can't say that. Don't present it as a scientific statement. It's a statement of philosophy. It is. And ultimately, belief in God is too, because you have to step outside of science. Ultimately, you can't demonstrate God with absolute certainty and beyond any doubt using only science. No. But look, any position you take on origin, somewhere you got to step off and say, I believe that, based on the evidence. So that's where I'm going to be. Why are you hypothesizing that a current lack of understanding is evidence of God? No, sir. That is not what I'm doing. Thank you for asking. The more we learn about the natural world, the more powerful the evidence becomes for a designer. It's like in that court case. The more pieces of evidence they found fitting together showed that somebody from the outside tampered with that. It didn't happen by natural causes. And that's what's happened to us in the 20th and 21st century. The more we've learned, about the natural world, the more powerful the evidence becomes that somebody designed us. It's not based on ignorance. It's based on the more we know, the worse it gets for a non-theist position. The entire universe isn't just right for life. Our planet happens to be, let's see here. Oh, our planet happens to be. The entire universe isn't just right for life. Our planet happens to be. Well, you know, sometimes a teacher feels like I have failed because I didn't get my point across. Well, and maybe that's the case here with this writer, and I'm not being critical, I'm just saying I feel like I have failed. If that's what you think I said. I didn't say the universe, everything in it's just right. I never said that. I said, look at how many things have to be just right out of the universe in order to support life. And that is not coming from believers in God. That's coming from folks who don't believe in God. But they have to be honest enough to admit, look at how many things it takes. That doesn't mean everything is just right. Never said that. Let's see. I guess I need to quit reading from the same paper the whole time, or we won't have any time for anything else. So there's a question here about, do you have a website or a way to follow? You all have websites, so you can get those from them. I don't have a personal website. Frankly, I'm not a real good techie guy. I like to trace stuff, but I'm not real good at doing all that Facebook and all that kind of stuff. So no, I don't. Why Christianity and science? Not a criticism, but there wasn't anything particularly Christian, but definitely about God. I wonder if there's anything unique about Christianity that can be found in nature. No, I wasn't arguing that. I was arguing that Christianity and science can be coherent. Not that it's the only thing that can be coherent. So I wasn't trying to take that position either. A contemporary scientist, Doctor of Epigenetics, Dr. Carolyn Lee, states that she is first a believer, a Christian, and then a doctor. She defines the renewed mind medically, scientifically, but she's not trying to say science is making the word correct. The word is correct. Science is just trying to catch up with what God has already declared as true. The book is Switch On Your Brain. So there's an advertisement for a book I don't know anything about. So I probably shouldn't have read that one, but there you go. Excellent lecture, making me feel so special knowing this amazing God chose me and loves me. Well, thank you. I hope that's the case. Certainly do. Are you familiar with reasonstobelieve.com? Dr. Hugh Ross, the creator of the cosmos. Yes, I'm very familiar with those sources of information. Schaefer, Meyer, Stephen C. Those are just names again. And then there's a couple of questions here about age, the age of the earth. You note I didn't talk about that tonight, and that was on purpose. I mean, I have a position about that, and I'll be glad to talk about it, but that wasn't our subject tonight, so I prefer not to go into that tonight. Thank you. I'm a biologist and science trained, and it was great. Thank you. How is God seen in cells that split and mess up? I would say if the cells split and make identical copies of one another, and in some instances where there are slight errors made, it even corrects itself, somebody made that. That's all. So if that's how God did it, that's how it is. All right. Any others? That's probably good enough anyway. You folks, I'll tell you, may I give you an A for listening? Because you were with it tonight. Thank you so much. And I tell my chemistry classes, the first day of class, a lot of people think chemistry is boring. That's because you didn't have me. And I said, I want to tell you right now, in my class, you don't sleep. So if you're back tomorrow night, and I forget to say it, I don't allow sleeping. And if I were you and I just had a big supper and I worked hard all day, I'd probably be sleeping. But I don't want sleeping because I don't want you to miss anything. So if I see folks sleeping, I'll probably make you all stand up and wiggle. But I want to thank you because really you were a good audience. I've done a lot of these, and you listened well. I'd give you an A in attentiveness. And by the way, thank you also for anybody that asks questions that are kind of different from what I think. I'm welcoming. I love it when people come to something like this who disagree with me. That's healthy. And really the great sadness to me in science, I cannot teach what I taught you tonight in a public school. I'm not allowed. Folks, there are only two answers to the question, where did you come from? You either came by being designed or you didn't. You came by natural causes. There is no other answer. And the answer that you came by being designed is excluded because that's called religion. So I think I could win an argument if there's only one answer. And it would be healthy in science to discuss the possibility of intelligent design using science, not the Bible, using science. And I think that's what I'm doing. So thank you for your careful attention. Hope you'll be back tomorrow night, and we'll do chemistry. How do you beat that?
Very encouraging. Thank you all for being here. And as he said, we'll meet again tomorrow night, Lord willing, at 7 o'clock. You're all welcome. We hope you can be back tomorrow night. Joseph is going to lead us in a prayer to dismiss us. And Buddy will be around for a little while if you'd like to ask him some questions. And feel free. And we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. Thank you.
Let us pray. Dear God and Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for letting us be here tonight to learn more about how you created this earth, Lord, and the whole universe, all of it. Lord, we pray that all of our hearts and minds will be open to learn more about your creation. We pray that if anyone here tonight has not come to know you, that they might go home and contemplate on the facts that Buddy presented tonight and might come to know you more, Lord. We pray that all those that are in audience tonight will go home safely and return, if that may be in your will, Lord. And we pray that Buddy will go home and be safe as he returns tomorrow to present again, Lord. We pray all this in your Son's most precious name. Amen.